Yeah. So it was about a year and a half total of treatments and surgeries to kind of get through all of it. And then it was like, okay, you're on your way. Go recover now. And it's like, oh,
now live a
gosh.
normal life. You know, that's, because
Yeah.
that's just living in a totally different world for you for, a year and a half. It's what it's sounding like, in and out of your radiation and doctors, and, I'm sure not being able to eat the same way or feel the same way or think the same way.
Let's talk Tales.
Today's Tales with Taylor guest is a dedicated serial entrepreneur with a passion for supporting small service-based businesses. Her journey has ranged from designing and handcrafting toddler training pants to running a thriving doula and childbirthing education business, with the latest venture being Orange Blossom Bookkeeping, to empower women-owned service-based businesses, especially midwives, massage therapists, mental health professionals, and coaches, to focus on their clients and families while gaining valuable financial insights and essential financial clarity needed to watch your business blossom and thrive. It's Nikki Ausdemore. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Taylor. How are you?
Doing great. Did I get your last name correct?
You did.
We're starting out good then. Okay. So tell me the tale. How did you get from being so involved, the training pants to doula and child, like those all were in the same industry, but then to completely jump ship and go to bookkeeping, what brought you there?
Yeah. So it's kind of a long story, right? Because life just takes all sorts of turns and twists. But I was raising 3 babies during the time that I was a doula and a childbirth educator, and then got pregnant and had my 4th. And my husband's job changed. So he just wasn't as available to come home and drop everything whenever I needed to head out to a birth. So life changed, right? So I just took on doing some more administrative work, working for a naturopathic physician and midwife, and working at a birth center. So I was still able to kind of keep my feet into the birth world, but not be attending births on a regular basis. And I loved it. And then one day I was diagnosed with cancer. And so I had to quit doing everything that I love doing and just slow down, which was a blessing, And when it was time to go back into the work world after taking some time off for treatment, I went to work for HealthShare in the maternity department. So I was still keeping people, serving people and women in that maternity environment, but just in a very different way. And after working in kind of that corporate environment for about 3 years, I decided I wanted to go back to working for myself again, and was looking for an option. And I found an online bookkeeping training. I knew that I loved administrative work. I knew that I loved serving women-owned businesses. And I knew that that would be a way that I could continue that work and still just move forward with doing something totally different than what I was currently doing, but serving my passions,
That's awesome. And I can only imagine how much of a transition it must have felt to go from being around babies to them being around computers and Excel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, it was over the course of several years that I stopped attending births and moving into that corporate space. And I was busy raising my 4 kids at the same time. So it was kind of a blessing to be able to step away from such demanding on-call work after having done it for about 13 years. Being at the beck and call of your phone all the time is hard, I love it. It's a passion, but I knew it was my time to step away. And so moving more into that administrative stuff that I loved was just kind of second nature, It was just, like I said, just serving women in a different way. When I started the bookkeeping business, my goal was to serve the women who serve the women.
Nice. Okay. And hence the midwives, the massage therapists, and things like that.
Exactly.
And, I find that a lot of people in those crafts are really good at their craft, but then when it comes to some of the business nuances, maybe not so much there, keeping up with receipts. And so what are some of the, common pitfalls you find people run into, or the, common issues, whether it be, not keeping track of receipts or only using an Excel spreadsheet for, data information?
Right. There's so many misconceptions when it comes to bookkeeping, just about that it's a lot more simple than it really is. People don't realize that there's assets and liabilities to track. It's not just categorizing expenses and income, but it's, like I said, it's tracking those assets and liabilities. I had one client that came to me with a $90,000 franchise fee that wasn't tracked as an asset on his books. So that's a huge asset that really needs to be attributed in his bookkeeping, right? So simplifying it, I think, is a huge pitfall. Commingling business and personal funds and not separating those things out, paying themselves too regularly out of their business. You can take every dollar out of your business, but it needs to be done in a regular way and transferred to your personal account, and not just used to be spending at the grocery store.
Right. Yeah. I started my business in 2014, and I want to say it was honestly probably closer to 2018 that I actually set ourselves up as, W-2 employees of our business. Because you're never given that guidance. When you sign up for your LLC, you're not given, okay, here's your handbook to, do everything else successfully.
Exactly. And especially if you're an LLC, if you're commingling those funds, then you're piercing that corporate veil and you're essentially dissolving your LLC. So everything that you worked so hard for to get that LLC and you paid to have it done is essentially just going to go by the wayside, because if you're being reckless with your money. So you're going to make sure that you're being really careful with, managing that LLC and not commingling those funds. But that's probably the number one pitfall, I say, is those business owners not keeping everything separate like they should.
Yes. And I think too, sometimes in the beginning, it's like that fine line of, is it a gig? Is it an actual business?
For sure.
That things do commingle perhaps too long. And so would you recommend that someone, creates a business account as soon as they are getting any type of funding through business, even if it is a side gig?
Absolutely. A separate business bank account from day one. All income goes into there. All business expenses come out of there. Nothing else comes in and out of it except for that. Pay yourself weekly if you want to, but transfer it to your business account, and then pay for your personal expenses or transfer to your personal account, and then pay your personal expenses out of that account, for sure.
Yeah. Definitely. So tell me, what are some of your favorite tales you've ever read or watched? So some of your favorite books or movies?
Oh, so there's a book that I read a couple years ago. It's called Fear's Not the Boss of You. And I just found it so empowering and so inspiring to apply that to so many different parts of my life, right? Not just business, but personal parts about, not letting your fear get the best of you. And I've grappled with anxiety my whole life. I have a daughter who, suffers with anxiety as well. So we kind of took that on as, okay, what can we do in fear and move through it, right? You don't let your fear stop you. You do it in fear and you just keep moving on. And that's how you become stronger. So it was a really interesting book. I really loved it. It's written really easily, and it's like she's just talking to your best friend,
Very nice. Yeah, I think it was Jamie Foxx I heard once on a podcast that he tells his kids that when they're scared, what's on the other side of fear? Nothing. It's literally nothing.
Exactly.
And so just kind of taking that step and doing it.
Right. Yeah. Right. And then things aren't so fearful moving forward. You realize you get to the other side of it and there really wasn't anything to be afraid of.
Yeah. And the fact that too, most people regret the things that they didn't do than the things that they actually did do.
Absolutely.
And so that's very interesting. Does your daughter, work with you? Do you get your family involved at all with your business? Because it sounds like you obviously love kids, and you got, 4 of them, you said.
I do.
That's quite a few. Do you get them to, do any of the admin work or anything like that?
Not yet for my business. I have 3 boys and 1 girl, and my 3 boys work for my husband's business.
Oh, that's cool.
So they all work in the family business right now, and then I'll hire my daughter next year. To start. She'll be a junior in high school, so I'll hire her next year.
That's a good time. Yes.
Yeah. And then we'll start getting her to do some administrative work for me and maybe some advertising. And
excellent. Do any of them have does she have a passion for wanting to take on this business afterwards?
Not necessarily. My kids kind of look at me and they're like, okay, so you get to do all this from home. That actually sounds like a pretty good gig. Like maybe we would be interested in it. Nobody's expressing interest right now, but they're watching.
Okay.
They're
still watching, observing, seeing that you're allowed to wear whatever comfy clothes.
Right.
And that's excellent.
Stay in my gym clothes for the day and sit at my computer and do my thing.
Right. And still help people, which also feels really good that
Absolutely.
you're helping people with a really important service.
Yeah.
And then what's your husband's business? You said that it's also, a family business that the boys are helping with.
Yeah. So he runs Impact Cabinetry. They're a cabinet wholesale broker.
Okay.
So he sells to custom home builders and residential remodelers.
Very cool. And then do you do his books?
I do.
Okay, excellent.
Yep. They were my first client, so I was able to kind of dig in and get my feet wet and make some mistakes and fix it and clean it up and learn so many lessons, in that kind of exploration time period. Yeah, it's been a really good way to learn.
That's excellent. And,
yeah.
Because you said that, you wanted to do the admin because you enjoy the admin work. And, it sounds that you're having more flexibility. You're now actually able to be there to help the kids more because you're not on call. But what was it about bookkeeping in particular? Because admin work could have just been email campaigns, follow-up, social media.
Right.
Why bookkeeping in particular?
I had done a little bit of bookkeeping when I worked at the birth center. And so I had just a touch of experience with it and knew that I enjoyed doing the work. Overall, I always say that I love organization and I love numbers, and bookkeeping is the organization of numbers, right? It's just putting things the way that they should be and keeping it neat and clean and orderly.
Telling a story through numbers. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So organizing numbers, bookkeeping, and here it is.
Awesome. That is very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me, what was the tale behind the name Orange Blossom? Because everyone, I think one of the hardest parts about starting a business is choosing the name and choosing the brand. And how did you get there?
Yeah. So I was getting everything all set up for my business, and it was time to create a Facebook page. And in order to create your Facebook page, you need to have a name, right? So I was sitting in my dining room, and it would have been January of 2022, and I had my back door open. And it was January, it's orange blossom season, right? And I had three big orange trees in my backyard, and I could smell it. And I was trying to evoke a name that brought me peace and joy and happiness. And I was smelling the orange blossoms, and I was like, that's it, Orange Blossom Bookkeeping. Like, it brings me peace, it brings me joy. It's a feminine name, and it just is really kind of gentle, but joyful.
Yeah, it checked all the boxes, I bet. Because, for those of you who have never smelled orange blossoms, you're missing out.
Like, you are
definitely, I love it. I love in my backyard, too. Yeah, we have orange and lemon trees, and just those blossoms just pack a punch, a beautiful punch. And and it does have that feminine feel, blossom.
Right.
But what does the orange blossom produce? A physical orange. And so it's like with your bookkeeping, you're helping them produce more results through, your blossom bookkeeping.
That's right.
I love it.
There's
right. Lots of good imagery with it. So love that story.
Yeah. I love the colors that go with it. And just so much about it was just perfect. It just fit. When you find that name, you're like, okay, this is it. This is the one I'm going to go with.
Right. Well, at least with you have the bookkeeping name in the end, so people have an idea. For me, when I say financial potion, everyone's confused, but that's okay because I want to then have the conversation about it.
Exactly.
So I don't want people to assume they know.
Exactly. It elicits that interaction.
Yes.
So, and that's what you need. That's what you're looking for, right? To be able to talk about your business.
Definitely. And so I know we've had the opportunity of connecting through Nabo. So tell me the tale about how you first connected with Nabo.
Yeah. So Susie Glover Garman is the one that introduced me to Nabo. We work together closely, and she's an amazing friend. And so she introduced me to Nabo and the concept, and invited me to a couple meetings. And I started attending meetings, and then shortly after was asked to become the volunteer bookkeeper for Nabo, and accepted that responsibility. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside Amy Fuller as the treasurer. And so, that's kind of how I've gotten involved with it. And I just am so grateful for all of the opportunities that Nabo affords, all of the mentorship and the trainings and the connections and networking and the inspiration of just being in this room full of women-owned business owners that is just, it just makes you want to do that much better in your own business, right? Being around so many wonderful women.
Definitely. And for you, what a great room to be in when your primary focus is women-owned service-based businesses.
Yes.
Well, NABO, if you're not familiar with the acronym, National Association of Women Business Owners. And so it is a room full of people you could potentially be working with.
That's right. That's right. I always say these are my people, right?
That is excellent. That's excellent. And so tell me, what's a tale you wish you would have told your younger self? And this could be your, 10-year-old self. This could be your 20-year-old self. This could be yesterday. What's something you wish you would have told yourself sooner?
I would say don't sweat the small stuff. Super basic tip, right? But it's so true. So many times we get hung up on the little details and the small annoyances of life. And the reality is that tomorrow's not given. It's not a promise. And I think once you've had a cancer diagnosis and you realize that, life is very short and fragile, that the little things just are not to be worried about, So life is short. Don't sweat the small stuff and never work for a manager that makes you cry because life is way too short for that.
So I'm guessing there's another story there. I'm guessing, had a bad boss?
Yeah, that was why I decided to get out of the corporate environment. It was just, I told my husband I did not beat cancer to sit at my desk and cry. And this is not how I'm going to live my life.
After cancer, too.
Yeah.
What was the cancer diagnosis, if you don't mind sharing?
Breast cancer.
Oh, wow. Power to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was in 2017, so it's been 7 years.
Okay.
And I'm doing great and doing well.
Awesome.
And yeah. That's awesome. But, back to your question, it's like so many times we just push through and do things that, we think we have to, forgetting that this life is such a blessing that we just need to take advantage of every opportunity. And if we're not happy with where we're at, don't be afraid to move. Fear is not the boss of you, right? Yeah. Move through that and be bold and make changes because this is the one life you're given and make the most of it.
Yeah, that's a shame. My goodness, you were a survivor and then you just had to go back and deal with nonsense again. Yeah. So
right?
That's such a shame.
Yeah.
But
I'm grateful that I was able to make that change and say, this isn't what I'm going to do. I'm not, so many women or so many people just stay in a position or a place or a relationship that isn't healthy and isn't good for them. And I was blessed that I was able to get out of that job and move on with, doing my own business, and able to change the dynamic of that, So, and I attribute that to my husband that was able to say, yeah, let's go for it. It's time to move on,
It's excellent that you had that support system.
Absolutely.
Not everyone does have that actual, supporting figure in their lives. So he sounds like a decent dude.
Oh yeah. He's a good guy.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Oh goodness. So I am curious, you don't mind, with your did you go to the doctor and they find it? Did you find it? What would...
Yeah, so I found it. I was on vacation in San Diego, and my 4 kids and my husband and I were sitting in a room sitting in an Airbnb watching a baseball game, and I kind of reached up and felt it, and I was like, that's not supposed to be there. And I looked at my husband and I said, I just found a lump, and he's like, you need to get it checked out. And I said, well, yeah, of course I'll get it checked out, but I'm sure it's nothing. Of course it's nothing, how old was I? 43 years old, It's absolutely going to be fine. So I went home and went to the doctor and got a mammogram done. And they're like, it doesn't look like cancer at all. But, let's obviously get it checked out. And had some hiccups and bumps with the radiologist and getting it diagnosed. And that was July of 2017 when I found it. And I was finally diagnosed in September of 2017. Oh, wow. Okay. So it took 2 months. Yeah. And then I started chemo in October of 2017. Okay. So, and I did 5.5 months of chemo and then double mastectomy and then a couple surgeries afterwards. And yeah, so it was about 1.5 years total of treatments and surgeries to kind of get through all of it. And then it was like, okay, you're on your way. Go recover now. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Now live a normal life. That's, because that's just living in a a totally different world for you for, a year and a half. It's what it's sounding like, in and out of your radiation and doctors, and, I'm sure not being able to eat the same way or feel the same way or think the same way.
Yeah.
How are you able to transition and kind of get back into the groove of normal life?
Life is not ever normal again, right? Like, it's never the same as it was before. It's the new normal afterwards. So it's just a whole different perspective, right? That you've been through this. It was about a year and a half. It was about 6 to 9 months of pretty much being in bed, and not really being able to participate in my life and my kids' lives the way that I wanted to. So it's rebuilding. And then you just kind of move on and realize, like I said before, all of those annoyances of the stress and the day-to-day stuff is just not that big of a deal, And it's like, okay, so we have homework to do tonight. That's awesome. You just see things differently, right? But yeah, the normal is never the same again. So now that you've had this wake up call and you realize that anyone can be hit with it and that it could potentially come back at any time, it's this balance between being cautious and not letting it run your life, right? So it's this very delicate balance of, I have to really pay close attention to my body more so than anybody, but not living by that.
Right.
Yeah. Right? So that's always a challenge in writing that fine line and not letting the anxiety kind of take over of what if, but always having a backup plan in my head of what if, because I'm a planner, right? So I'm always thinking of, okay, what if it were to come back? What would I do? How would I be able to work? How would I be able to manage my life? What would that look like? So it's just a different nuance to life that most people don't have, thankfully, But at the same time, it feels like you get farther away from it. And so it becomes a part of your past and not a part of your daily life. But I'll be honest, the farther away from it I get, the closer I feel like I'm coming to a recurrence. So it's kind of this like double-edged sword of...
Is that common? Like, I'm not very familiar. Like, I obviously know of breast cancer, but I don't know of the statistics of, remission. Is it guaranteed to come back? What's the percentage of it to come back?
It's not guaranteed, and I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but it is a possibility, right?
You always be aware of a possibility.
Yeah. So I do a lot of things to help prevent recurrence.
Okay.
I take a lot of supplements. I eat healthy. I go to the gym. I do all of the things that I can do.
And those are all suggested by the doctor? Okay.
They're all directed by my naturopathic oncologist.
Nice.
So I have an oncologist and a naturopathic oncologist.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
I love that, bringing both kind of modalities together to work together.
Absolutely. And they support one another.
Lovely.
And they, agree with working with one another, which is fantastic. I've had top-notch care, which is so amazing. But finding that balance between doing all of the things to prevent recurrence, and then you just have to trust and move forward. That whatever happens will happen,
right.
And hopefully it won't ever happen again.
Right. Hopefully not at all. You plan ahead for not to show up.
Yeah.
Are there certain foods that are recommended to help prevent more than others, or?
There are some foods that you can do. Eating soy actually is actually one that's supposed to be really good for you. So like edamame.
Okay.
Soybeans is great. There's foods that you're not supposed to eat, like asparagus has asparagine in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I try to avoid asparagus as much as possible.
It's probably not that big of a deal of all vegetables.
Right? Not the hardest thing in the world to do.
Not the hardest one to say no to.
Doing things like a 13-hour fast, which is, statistically proven 13-hour fast provides the most benefit, more so than 12 hours. And 14 hours doesn't provide any additional benefit. So for some reason, a 13-hour fast is the one that hits the sweet spot. And it's a pretty easy thing to introduce into your life,
Excellent. And of course, this was working with your naturopathic doctor. So any suggestions here, don't just say
Absolutely.
that it's guarantee, you know, because I know for myself, if I went on a 13-hour fast, I would actually be puking and getting very, very sick. My metabolism, like I have to eat.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, everyone's different. And
Absolutely.
So that's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
So that's what works best for me
Yeah.
with the guidance of my physician, you know?
Love that. Yeah. And everything is personalized. Yeah. And it's
Yes.
important to work with doctors. And I love that you're able to find two doctors that will work, you know, synergistically together. Like that's so important.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
excellent.
I agree.
That's excellent. So what's your favorite animal with a tail?
Oh, my favorite animal. I would say dogs. I just love, we've had a lot of dogs throughout the years. And we lost one of our dogs about a year ago, and he's still so deeply missed, you know?
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, we had rescued him. We had him for about 5 years, and it was not long enough, you know?
Right.
And then right now we have another rescue who's a Chihuahua and a Cavalier King Charles mix.
Oh, cute. That
And then
sounds cute.
Yeah, she's adorable.
Yeah.
She's adorable. And then we have a purebred Cavalier King Charles as well, and he is just so much fun. He's a little puppy, and he's adorable.
That's awesome.
So yeah, dogs bring a lot of joy in my life.
Well, and especially too with the 4 kids, you know, I feel like, you know, kids and animals, they just kind of go hand in hand.
Yes, for sure. We've always had dogs since before my husband and I got married 29 years ago. We've always had dogs.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, always had at least 2 in the house.
Well, you got to give them some companionship. So, you know, we've always had at least 2 cats in the house so that way they can play with each other. Although the latest duos don't really love each other as much as we would like, but you know, what you going to do?
Right? Yeah, you never quite know how they're going to get along.
You never know. It always seems for me, it's like I'll have, you know, a boy and a girl, and then the boy will be younger and be a bad little brother to the girl, then the girl will pass, and then the brother will be a good big brother to the little girl, and now the girl's like, I don't want to be a big sister. And so it's just like, whatever the roles change.
Yes.
It's just
the passing of the torch from one animal to one pet to the next, right?
Yeah. No, it's always an ordeal. So what are some of your favorite tools for bookkeeping? You know, there's QuickBooks, and then there's Xero, and, you know, there's so many, you know, some people just use a good old-fashioned Excel and some formulas. And so what are some of your favorite tools to use?
I work almost exclusively in QuickBooks Online.
Okay.
So I have looked at Wave recently, and it looks very intuitive and very similar. I've done some personal budgeting for clients using EveryDollar.
Okay.
And then also Mint, which was run by Intuit. So it was very similar to QuickBooks Online. But almost all of my bookkeeping work is done in QuickBooks Online. Okay. I do find it superior to Excel. Like I know a lot of people like to do Excel because it's an easy DIY. But Excel's
there. You know, most people already have the Microsoft Office suite for your Word, or you know, you can use Google Sheets, which is the same thing.
And it's free, and you're not having to pay for it, but it also doesn't give you the reporting and the same information in the same way that that you might get the most benefit from when you're using a QuickBooks Online program. And QuickBooks Online now has a program that's $10 a month.
Oh, wow.
For small service-based businesses that aren't invoicing or using bill pay or anything like that through it.
Okay.
So they do have a really affordable option for those really small businesses. So they're really kind of hitting all of those markets, you know, everything from those really small businesses up to the large businesses that need a lot more functionality, you know?
Right. Yeah. And it's true with the Excel, you know, you might be able to track what you spent and your expenses, money in and out, but then how are you going to quickly formulate that into a profit loss sheet?
Exactly. You're not going to get a P&L. You're not going to get a balance sheet. You're not going to be tracking your assets. You're not going to be tracking your liabilities appropriately. You know, there's there's some flaws to the system.
Yeah.
For just tracking simply expenses, it's absolutely useful. You know, but it's not giving you a full picture of your business's financial health.
Right. Are there some things that you find people aren't tracking enough? You know, are there particular, maybe insurance, or, you know, is there any category that you typically find that maybe tax conversations you have to remind people about? Or?
Right. Yeah. So I would say the number one missed deduction by business owners is merchant fees. So they're not tracking those merchant fees. Oftentimes those fees are deducted before the income hits the bank account.
So like the credit card processing fees, things like that.
Yeah. So they're just tracking the net income, the net amount that's hitting the bank account, and not tracking the gross income less that merchant fee. They're missing that step, right? So then when we're only tracking and reporting net income, that's not going to match up with what the payment processor is reporting to the IRS. So when we're not reporting equal amounts to the IRS, then that's kind of a red flag.
And would that be a red flag to be audited? I feel like the big A word has always been so scary. I'm terrified of it, but I have no idea what it really means.
Right.
So if someone were to be audited, what does that really include? And what are some ways to avoid getting audited?
Yeah. So, that includes the IRS, like literally coming and looking through all of your transactions and making sure that you can prove that what you claimed as a deduction was A, a business expense, and B, actually happened. And the way they want to see that is physical receipts. And you have to prove, like a meal, who were you with? What were you discussing? And why were you expensing the meal? Was it a true business deduction? So keeping track of those things is all really important. Not just that, hey, I went to Makayo's today, right? Because we all have that. And this is how much I spent. But what was the intention of the meeting and who were you with?
Right.
Those are details that need to get recorded as well. So yeah, not reporting the same income as your payment processor is a trigger for an audit potentially.
Got it. Yeah. So all the numbers have to equal out and balance out.
Yeah. Both sides report income equally, and then we take that merchant fee deduction to take you down to your net income. But it's often forgotten about or not realized or just not known about.
It's amazing how many things in life, before this interview, I had someone who helps with like life insurance and disability insurance and all these things that I feel like should be taught in like your senior class, like get ready for life class,
right?
Because that's so important to know whether, even if you never think of starting your own business, those are very important things to be aware of, just to protect yourself. And I know for myself, like I have my filing cabinet years and years and years worth of, taxes and receipts and backlog stuff because I was told to. But on average, how long should you hold your backlogged information, your tax returns and so forth in case of an audit?
Right. So the rule of thumb is 7 years. So you should be keeping those things for 7 years. Now, oftentimes those heat sensitive receipts are going to be totally faded and gone after 7 years. Yeah. So using some kind of documentation, whether you scan them in or taking photos of them is really useful as well. So that if, 5-6 years down the road you are audited, you do have that documented proof of those receipts that have probably long faded by now and aren't going to be legible anymore.
Yeah, the number of times I've looked in my wallet and I'm like, what was this for? So, agreed.
Right? Yeah.
Agreed with that.
Yeah, so thank God for digital technology these days, right? That
and
we're able to
along
do
those
that.
lines with digital technology, you had mentioned before how every business should have a business bank account. So if someone was just using their business credit card, would the credit card reporting suffice, or do you still need to have an itemized receipt?
An itemized receipt. A credit card statement does not work for the IRS. They don't want it. And they want you to actually be able to print it out and hand them a paper copy of it. Wow. So they don't want to get into your digital files. They don't want to get into your QuickBooks files. So uploading those receipts into QuickBooks is really kind of a waste of time.
Wow.
Because they're not going to dig through your QuickBooks and look, you're going to have to go into each of those receipts, print it out, and then provide it to them. So yeah.
I just learned something. I definitely thought like, okay, everything's in this one account. We aren't, commingling at all. So everything should just be, here's the math and information.
Yeah.
But you're telling me that they would want to see you purchase from B&H this tiny arm rig, this battery, this and that. And,
yep. You got it. Yeah. Statements do not suffice. It just tells them where you went and what you spent, but it doesn't tell them what you bought. So if I go to Target,
right,
it's not going to tell them if I bought toilet paper or if I brought printer paper.
Yeah.
So they want all that detailed information.
Excellent. And so through QuickBooks, you said it's not worth to upload the Did I miss
Yeah,
that?
no. In my experience, it's not worth it to upload those receipts into QuickBooks. It's time consuming and doesn't really provide a lot of value for the time spent doing it.
So it'd be better to scan it, keep the digital file in a folder of 2024 or 2025.
Exactly.
Just keep it in that folder.
Yep. Just keep it in a folder on your computer. And then that way, if you ever were to get audited, you could print them all out if you needed to, or maybe they would be willing to look at that digital file.
Okay.
But they do actually want to see receipts, itemized receipts.
Do you get any kind of penalty fees of getting audited? If you get audited, is it a matter of just proving your innocence and then you're good to go?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different outcomes, right? There's a lot of different ways that it could go. It could be that they're going to come and ask questions and say, is this really the income you had? And are these really the deductions you had? And you prove it and say, yes, we're good to go. Or they say, we're going to not allow these deductions because you don't have receipts, or, there's all sorts of different scenarios of things that could happen that could incur penalties and fines for sure.
Wow. Yeah, because I always, it's like feared, it's just like, oh, man, I'm going to get like a week, to gather all your information. You're like, how in the world?
You're like, I'm not going to sleep all week. I'm just going to be sitting there trying to gather all my receipts and,
Yeah.
But if you do a good job of keeping all of those receipts in a folder, or a file on your computer or an email folder, then at least you have a really good starting point of where to go. A lot of people just don't even save those email receipts,
So make yourself a folder, you're saying. Just in your Gmail or your Outlook, and just have, a receipts folder where you can just keep them all in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do the same thing in your phone, right? You can take a picture of that receipt while you're at lunch and then put it into a business receipts folder file, like photo album folder. And then you've got it all right there if you need it. It's all chronologically in order, and you've got everything that you need. And
dated. It's all dated correctly.
It's all dated. It's
nice.
date stamped. It's time stamped. And you've got everything you might need in order to prove. And hopefully nobody's getting audited anytime soon.
Let's hope. I'm not I really don't want to put this out there in the atmosphere about getting audited, but it's good information to know in case.
Yes. Well, we always want to stay on the good side of the IRS, right?
Exactly.
So accurate financial reporting really helps you stay there.
That's what you want. You want to get your, if there are any rebates, you want to get them on time. I remember the year that my husband and I got married was the first year we had a joint, filing, and we wanted to put all of our money in our new joint bank account. They seized and held, we actually had a really good rebate that year, like a really good, refund that year. Yeah. They held it until Christmas Eve. I had to spend, no joke, 8 hours on the phone, just kept getting hung up on, had to recall, hung up. They eventually said, we put you in the fraud department because we thought it was a fraud.
Oh, because the names were different then.
The names were different because I had changed my last name. Right. It was a new bank account. It was the first time we ever filed jointly. All these things that they're just like, this is a fraudulent return.
You're like, no, we're just newly married.
Right? Like, and we'd really love the money.
Right? We could really use the money.
Yeah. So, that was a pain. So the IRS can be
the lessons we learn, right?
Well, I don't even know what the lesson was there. It was truly just like, don't get married or change your name, I guess. Yeah. Because that's what they said. Because the gentleman on the phone was like, oh, yeah, that happened to my wife and I when we it's like, you worked there and it happened to you? And so they can be finicky, but they're still people. And that's the only thing, too. People can, still have issues. People then make judgment calls, like a fraudulent call. Yeah. And so you just got to be prepared. And
you just got lumped in with all those actual fraudulent refunds that,
I know. And luckily, I'm just diligent. And so one day I saw a pretty big opening in my calendar and I was like, IRS day.
Right.
We are getting to the bottom of this.
Today is the day we're going to adult.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And so other than commingling, are there other common misconceptions or issues you see people regularly do that would not only, make it so their books are cleaner or that they're less likely to get audited, but to make your life easier?
Yeah. So every month I have transactions for each client that I might not know what it's for. I can do a quick Google search, but if it's not coming up with something definitive that it's a restaurant or a gas station or, you know, what it might be, then I have to put it on a spreadsheet or send it to my clients and say, hey, what was this for? Tell me how I should categorize this, you know? If you went to Target or Walmart and we don't have a rule set that Walmart is always office supplies, then I'm going to have to ask you, you know? So what is this? So getting back to me with those answers can sometimes prove to be a little difficult. Some clients are better about it than others. So getting me those answers then allows me to move forward with getting you your final monthly reports for the month prior, right? Without it, I don't have an accurate information and your reports are going to be inaccurate, not complete. You're going to have a bucket of uncategorized expenses that can't sit there. We can't file a tax return with uncategorized expenses because we don't know if they're deductible. We don't know if they're meals that are 50% deductible.
Yeah.
We don't know what they are, right? So anything uncategorized or miscellaneous should never be sitting on a profit and loss.
Interesting.
So we need to get those resolved.
Is there a way to give you that information on the front end so you don't have to go back and say, wait, what was Walmart? Could they say Walmart cleaning supplies, Walmart, you know, paper products or?
Absolutely. Clients could do that. We have a shared Google Sheet that I use right now. So every month I just send them the reminder and say, here it is. And occasionally I have somebody that will go in and be like, oh, hey, I paid this contractor this amount. This is going to be coming through. So we just put it on the shared spreadsheet so I know ahead of time what it is.
So you just mentioned contractor. Do you help people manage both their W-2 employees' payroll as well as, 1099 contractors?
So I recommend Gusto for payroll.
Okay.
So I do send everybody to Gusto. It's so easy to use that I always say you don't need to pay me to do it. You can do it yourself. Wow. Save yourself the money. It's an affordable service. And it's just really easy to run on your own. So the time, energy, and effort that you would use sending me your employees' information, you can pop it right into Gusto and have payroll run.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's just that simple and that easy to use. So I always say run it through there. It's great on a bookkeeping on my end. It's great on that end, and it's just really user-friendly on your end. So I recommend them for payroll. And then for contractors, you can actually run it through a payroll company like Gusto. You can also send them payment through PayPal, or if you have a business Venmo, you can do that. Some people use Zelle, but then when you're using Zelle, then you're responsible for sending that 1099 at the end of the year.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Whereas if you use PayPal or Venmo or Gusto, they send the 1099 out. So it's critical to remember that.
Gusto will send the 1099. Okay. Yeah. Well, I might actually hop on the Gusto because I know, beginning of every January, I always have to message my accountant. Like, here's the list of the contractors that made over the $500.
Yes.
And can you please submit W-9s for them or 1099, whatever the official form is. And, then I have to mail that out to everybody and send those out to everybody. So Gusto would actually do that for even independent contractors.
Yeah.
So you're saying? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Gusto. Might need to look into Gusto myself.
Yeah. And if you pay them with a credit card or with PayPal, the payment processor or PayPal will also send the 1099. But Zelle operates differently. If you pay them with an ACH, then you are responsible for that as well. So
interesting.
Yeah, all sorts of nuances with 1099s too.
So many things.
Yeah.
There's so many things. And it's also that balance as you're growing a business of like, okay, who is truly a accurate contractor versus who is actually a defined employee. And so that's always a little bit of a dance.
Oh, yeah, for sure. There's lots of rules and regulations set by the IRS for who qualifies as a 1099 versus a W-2 employee. So you have to be really careful that you're following those rules. Again, if you're audited and they come back and say that you've been paying people as 1099 contractors and they really qualify as a W-2 employee, then you're going to be hit with those penalties and fines and back taxes for those employees. And it's going to be a pretty hefty expense. So you really want to make sure that you are categorizing those people appropriately for sure and paying them appropriately and following all of those rules by the IRS, not just a couple of them, all of them.
So if someone was wanting to transition some people from maybe a contractor to a W-2 position, do you help them with any of that like HR aspects to it? Or?
I send them to Gusto.
You send them to Gusto.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gusto will help handle all of that.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
Gusto.
They're amazing. Their customer service is great. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll make sure we have a link to Gusto in the show notes here. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm definitely needing to look into that, because we are playing in that game of maybe we need to really think that everyone's, not everyone, but there are some people whom we're like, maybe it is a W-2. They're starting to we're tiptoeing that line. And
Right.
So, and I think there could be benefits to offering a W-2, but then there's the health insurance, and then do we offer the 401k, and then
Right.
so all the things.
It could be a slippery slope for sure. Yes. Yeah. But like you said, it's important that you're following those rules and regulations and, doing what the IRS deems is appropriate for the people that are working with you.
Definitely. And I think I hear in Arizona, you technically don't have to offer benefits, but you might as well just to have a
Right.
competitive edge amongst, other employers.
Exactly.
So.
Well, and the benefit of putting them on as a W-2 employee versus a 1099 contractor is that they're not responsible for paying their own self-employment tax. You're paying for the employee taxes or employer portion of the taxes. So that's, a benefit to them, especially if they're not truly running their own business. They don't really have deductions to help bring that gross income down to have less taxable income. Right? So it's a little unfair to put somebody in the position of a 1099 when they're not running their own business, right? They don't have anything to deduct to bring that income down. So
unless they do have things to deduct, because like our contractors are responsible for using their own computer, their own software, their own, internet service, their own, so with those, it's like, and I always educate, our new contractors. We work with a lot of college students for stuff, and we'll go through an internship with us. And then after the internship, we might offer them a contracting position.
Okay.
But I do tell them, I'm like, hey, you're going to want to track your expenses every time you're driving over to the office to have a meeting with me, track your miles. So like I always try to educate them a little bit on those nuances, because those were things I was not told when I first was a W-9, and I was definitely a illegitimate W-9. I had to be at an office at a certain time for a certain amount of time.
Oh, yeah. You didn't qualify as a contractor.
Oh, no, not at all. So I know from even that experience, which is amazing how many times we do take, like with your situation, you were like, I am not going to get yelled at, or I'm not going to cry and work for someone else. It's those life experiences that project you into where you are. And so, my life experience of being a illegitimate W-9 contractor has really helped me go, how can I help these people be successful, legitimate contractors?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just educating them about all of those benefits that are available to them as a 1099 contractor, Yeah,
because even deducting, on gas and just all those things that you put into when you submit for your taxes, it does make a bit of a difference.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, they need to be tracking all that stuff.
Excellent. So if you were to write a book, what would be the title of that tale?
Oh, gosh. That's a tough question, Taylor. I don't know, because I've never thought about writing a book. I work better in numbers.
So it would be maybe like a number, just like the number 8, because 8's like infinity, just call it 8 or something.
Yeah, there you go. Gosh, the only thing that's like coming to my mind is My Life as I Know It, right? Like it would probably be a book not about like a particular topic, but just about my life and about, everything that we've been through as a family, and my husband and I and our 4 kids, and all the lessons that we've learned growing up. And, the great thing about being in my early 50s is that I have a different perspective than I had even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And
which you look fabulous, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And I'm able to look back and say, oh man, I wish I would have done that differently, right?
Yeah.
So I wish I would have just not been so stressed out, or just not have been so...
letters to my younger self.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Letters with Maury, letters with Nikki, maybe something like that.
Very cute. Very cute. And, being a family with 2 businesses, not just one, what would be advice that you have to people who maybe are, young in their marriage or young in their family, trying to have their own business, whether it be together or separate? What are some of those things that you would recommend to people to keep still the love in the home?
Yeah. So one of the things we do is my husband and I decompress together. I decompress much more than he does. He doesn't talk nearly as much as I do. So we decompress together, but then that's it for the night, right? Like then we're going to move on and leave work at work and home is home. And so we've got to have that separation. Otherwise, if all we're ever doing is talking about work, then we lose who we are as a couple and as a family. So we need to really make sure that we're focusing on those two things individually, giving it the time that we need and the attention that we need to kind of like talk about our day and what happened. But then it just needs to go away for the night, you know?
Right.
Especially because my home office is like in the house.
I was going to ask that. When you think with your house layout, like is your home office close to the bedroom? Is it on separate sides? How do you have the layout?
No, it's right off my kitchen.
Okay.
So it's right there. It's easy for me to sit down and be like, oh, I'm just going to check an email, but I have to be really disciplined to not do that.
That's tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and just walk away for the evening. My husband works at an office outside of the home now, so that's much better for him. He has a desktop that he can't bring home.
Nice.
So he can check his emails on his phone, but he tries not to as much as possible. So yeah, just learning how to walk away from the businesses at the end of the workday, whenever that might be, you know?
Right.
And then just focus on the family and each other and, you know, the things that need to be done at home.
It's almost like the opposite mindset of what we were, you know, taught going into the corporate world, that you leave your life at the door. Like you leave your personal work at the door. Well, now it's you leave your work at the door.
At the door, right?
You know, and then come in and have a family and have life. You know, I know my husband and I, this is our second home together, and how we structure our house is the office is in one corner of the home, and then like the family living's on the complete opposite side of the house.
Yeah.
Our first home together, the office was downstairs, and then our home living was upstairs.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we've always tried to be like, it needs to be completely separate.
Yeah. For a long time, I had my home office in our bedroom.
Oh my gosh.
When I worked, you know, for the job, and we were working at home after COVID, I had my home office in our bedroom, and it worked for privacy reasons. That was fine. I don't need the privacy now that I needed then, because my kids are in school all day and I work while they're gone, in school or at work. But, so I don't need that privacy quite so much, but, again, I totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, talking about having an office in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And to me, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah. Right? It's not a good place. It's not a healthy environment to have your work is in your bedroom, you know? So I'm glad that we have that space now. It's set up a little bit differently. We've reconfigured their home. But as my kids are now older and moving out, I'll probably have 2 moved out within the next 6 months, I would guess.
Oh, wow.
So we'll be having down to 2 in the house. So I'll be able to move my office into one of the bedrooms and have a little bit more space. And then I'll really be able to have that separation of work and home. And I can close the door at the end of the day and not go back in until the next morning.
Definitely. That'll be big for you. That'll be good. And it might be good for, I don't know how, if you're excited or upset that people are going to be leaving the nest, but I know for some, it can be an emotional time. So sometimes giving a room a new purpose rather than it just being a shell of what it was can kind of help with the transition.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My oldest is 25. He's been out of the home for 4 years. He went to college at NAU and was out for 4 years, and now he's been back for 2 years. And he's engaged and going to be getting married. And so, you know, while I'm sad to have him move out and be leaving us, it's time. He's 20, you know, like I get it. It's
mission
time.
accomplished in a sense for you. You're like,
Absolutely.
I did the right, you know, you did your job as a mom.
Yes.
You know, help raise him to be, you know, someone in our society who's contributing and, you know, getting married, you said. So that's excellent.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm super excited for him. I'm really excited. And then my 21-year-old is going to be moving out here pretty soon too. And he just feels like he's like, at 21, I'm a man. I need to be on my own. Yeah. Like, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I moved out my high school graduation weekend. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. So, well, I was 18. I turned 18 in January. So I tried to move out at 18. So I was like, I'm 18. They're like, please stay until you graduate high school.
Yeah.
Fine. So then that weekend, I was like, all right. I told you.
Yeah. Wow. That's hard. That's hard. So I've been really grateful that we've been able to give them a soft place to be while they can just invest and save. And they've been amazing about investing. And my 19-year-old today said, Mom, my investments today are paying for Christmas. Like it's all paid for.
Oh my goodness.
Through his investments. I'm like, you were light years ahead of where I was at 19.
Yeah.
So allowing you to be at home during this time while you're doing that has enabled you to invest and save and get yourself financially in a place where you're so much further ahead than most kids. I will keep you at home all day long, you know?
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really good. And I'm sure, you know, all the kiddos have been able to get such great information from you in terms of, you know, financing and saving and, you know, how to balance your checkbook and all those good things.
Yeah, we talk about money a lot, you know, and they teach me about investing. So
wow. That's so good because, like, you know, financing, budgeting, those are normally kind of like taboo conversations. You're not really supposed to talk about that, but that's great that you are because it's a part of life that without, you know, understanding your finances, you know, it's really hard to navigate and make decisions. And
yeah, we've always been really honest with our kids about money and talked about, you know, can we afford that today, or we're not going to afford that because we can't pay cash for it yet. You know, and we're not going to put it on a credit card. So when we can pay cash for it, then we'll get it, you know? And they always laugh at me because every time I would go to the grocery store, they'd be like, can we have such and such? And I'd be like, if it's on sale and I have a coupon, you know?
Yeah.
Mom.
Well, thank you. No, honestly, you're making me feel a whole lot better because I was wondering the other day, I'm like, Eric, are we too honest sometimes with our kids? You know, just explaining like, no, we don't want to buy that because of XYZ reason, you know? And it's just like, well.
Yeah. I think if it's done in a healthy way of, hey, in our family culture, we don't have debt. And so we're not going to, you know, get you that today, but let's save for it, you know? So I think that's a healthy conversation. It's a healthy approach to money and finances rather than just saying yes to everything.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And or even just trying to teach them like the value of money. So like with our son, like we'll pay him to vacuum or pay him to do those things, and then he earns his money. But then he sees like, okay, I have to do something. And then now if I want this thing, you know, I know it's going to cost money. So is that value equal? Is the time that I spent to get the cash equal to what that is?
Right. And how badly do I want it? You know?
Right. Which he's learned. I don't really want things that much.
Right. But we work hard for money. That's just the way life is, right? That's just what we all do. So learning that from a young age is important, you know, that money just doesn't get handed to us. You know, we have to work for it.
Yeah.
And there's value in that.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder, I think, for these Arizona kids. Because at least back east where I grew up, you know, the leaves would fall, I saw money. The snow would fall, I saw money. You know, but you're out here, it's like, whole weeds?
Well, I will tell you, my daughter has 4 dog poop clients.
Oh, wow.
So she took over these clients for my son she took over one of them for my son that we have been picking up her dog poop for 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
Between my 19-year-old and now my 15-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah. So they get out there and they pick up dog poop and they make pretty darn good money per hour doing that. So
yeah, I'd probably pay someone to do it for me. It's one of the reasons why I don't have a dog. I don't want to do that. So excellent. Right?
For them, it's $10 a week. And for my daughter, it's $10 for about 10 minutes of work. So, you know.
It's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody's happy.
That's excellent. Right? Okay. Well, so that's an Arizona, you know, kid-friendly job there.
There you go.
Excellent.
Pulling weeds and picking up dog poop.
Pulling weeds and poop. All right. Doesn't sound glamorous, but you'll feel great when you earn your own money. So.
Yeah.
Excellent. Nikki, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the information you shared. Definitely tons of great information. Make sure you get connected with Nikki, especially if you're a woman-owned service-based business, just wanting some guidance. And I'm sure you'd even just have a conversation with someone who's curious more about bookkeeping, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I'd love to talk about all things bookkeeping. So give me a call.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Nikki.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it. It was super fun.
Awesome. Thank you for watching Tales with Taylor. Please make sure you like and subscribe to the Financial Potion YouTube channel to never miss an episode.